Hello, everyone. My name is Maureen Murat. I am the owner and principal at Crowdie Advisors. Today, we're going to be talking about crowdfunding for creatives. So first, I have to give a disclaimer. I am an attorney, but I am not your attorney. And I just want you to keep in mind that this presentation is being provided for informational purposes only. I am not giving tax, legal, investment, or financial advice. And I encourage you to do your own research, DYOR, in terms of determining whether a crowdfunding campaign is something that you want to engage in or you want to launch. Again, DYOR, do your own research. So let's get started. What is crowdfunding? So crowdfunding is essentially a process of funding a project or a venture by raising a relatively small amount of money from a large group of people. And typically that is done via the internet. We have plenty of options out there, and we'll discuss the different types of crowdfunding. But generally, this is the point, right? Everyone is putting money into the pot, and as a result, they will be putting it towards some goal or some effort or some venture or project that is common to everyone. Everyone wants to support that thing. And so crowdfunding has been a great way to not only raise money for charitable purposes, right? When someone needs assistance because of medical conditions, etc. But it's also become known to help businesses and projects like yours be funded, and so that you can continue to grow your portfolio. Different types of crowdfunding. So I'll go through the different ones, but today we'll mainly focus on the rewards-based and royalty-based crowdfunding, because those tend to be the most ideal types of crowdfunding for creatives. So different types of crowdfunding. Donation-based crowdfunding is just as it sounds. Donation-based crowdfunding is when people come together, putting a relatively small amount of money in a pot towards this common goal. And normally that common goal is, as I mentioned before, a charitable purpose. And so when these people give towards this cause, they don't expect anything in return. They're doing this out of the goodness of their heart and potentially for tax benefits. So rewards-based crowdfunding. Rewards-based crowdfunding is very similar to donation in the sense that when these people that are supporting this project or creation or business are putting money towards it, they're not expecting any return on the money that they gave, but they do expect a perk or some sort of a reward for giving that money in support of your project. And so some examples are t-shirts, such as this one, it says Crowdie Advisors on it. Some examples are mugs, or even being able to get a discount, or maybe early access, or maybe if you're manufacturing a product, they would be the first ones to get the product once it's out on the market. They would be the first ones to get it because they helped you, get to the point where you can manufacture the product. So there are different ways that rewards-based crowdfunding campaigns can really help spread the word about a project, and while doing that, also getting the support from the people who really want to see you grow. So debt and lending-based crowdfunding, as well as equity-based crowdfunding, they're both regulated crowdfunding. So what that means is, in order to be able to raise funds under these two types, debt or lending and equity-based, you have to go through a regulatory framework with the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. So with both of them, you have to register with the SEC, letting them know that you want to raise these funds. So with with debt lending-based crowdfunding, what happens is that this person is investing their money into this project or business. And the reason why they're investing and lending is because they expect a return on the money that they gave. And so that means you're essentially accepting a loan or a debt from a group of people who want to see your business grow, but they also want to get a return on that growth. So if you borrow $100,000, and you say that you need to borrow it at a 6% interest rate, then a group of people come together to get you to that point. And then once you're able to, based on your terms, you start making payments towards that debt. And each person that invested will get a return on their investment proportional to what they put in, because not everyone's going to invest the same amount. Oftentimes these crowdfunding campaigns have limits, or lower limits, or minimums, I should say. So minimum being like most times the average minimum is $250 for a debt or equity crowdfunding campaign. So with equity-based, it's very similar in the sense that the person who is investing and putting this money towards this project does want a return, but they're willing to wait on that return. And so in exchange for the investment, the company is giving that investor equity or ownership interest in the business. And so when this person takes on this equity, the expectation is that there will be a return on the investment, but it will be sometime later, 5 years, 10 years later. And then we get to royalty-based crowdfunding. So royalty-based crowdfunding is somewhat of a new phenomenon. I don't want to age myself, but if there are anyone out there who remembers, the different pirating sites for music, this is where royalty-based crowdfunding comes in to kind of bridge that gap, right? The gap between consumers and supporters being able to access your art and, but having to go through all these different intermediaries that don't really always benefit the artist. So with royalty-based, artists are going onto these different crowdfunding platforms, because remember, crowdfunding is generally done online. You go onto this crowdfunding platform and you can do it in different ways, and we'll go over some of the types of crowdfunding platforms. But essentially you go onto there and you either provide your art, whether it's visual art or music or film, to your base, and they will either pay a monthly fee, or they will pay some sort of fee towards, so that they can access your art. And then that way you will get partial payment of it as the artist, and they will get access to your art. And then the platform takes a little bit as well, but at least the artist gets more of the profit than if they had gone through a production company or an agent, etc. So hopefully this all makes sense. Given that this is being recorded, if you have any questions about these different types of crowdfunding, you definitely send me questions later. So crowdfunding platforms for the artists. Now I give you a few here. I actually got this chart from Fractured Atlas. I am not endorsing any of these platforms, but they do a really good job of explaining and helping artists, as far as I can tell from their online presence, in terms of helping artists determine which type of platform and what type of crowdfunding or what type of perks you want to offer to your supporters. So I'll say that. And then, as you can see, these are some of the most popular platforms: Fractured Atlas, Seed and Spark, which is specifically a platform specific for artists, Indiegogo, Kickstarter, which also has a lot of options for artists, whether it's visual art or music or film. There's Patreon, and then there's With Friends. So with Patreon, I do want to mention that the benefit, I guess, of Patreon is if you're an artist that does something or will provide or will create on a regular basis, Patreon might be a good place for that, because like I said earlier about royalty based, that would be a place for you to regularly put your content on and keep all your supporters watching whatever it is that you're providing. And as you can see, when you go down three lines on the left where it says platform fee, the platforms charge a fee. All that to say, whether it is a crowdfunding, an equity crowdfunding or debt crowdfunding platform, whether it's royalty based, whether it's donation based, they all charge a fee. So that is something else to keep in mind when you're thinking about what your campaign goal is. Keep in mind that the platform will also get a fee for facilitating those crowdfunded funds. So what that means is, because you are using them as an intermediary, right? They are the middleman or the platform or the intermediary that sits between you, the artist, and the person who is supporting your work. And so as a result, they ask for a fee. The other thing I want you to pay very, very close attention to is whether you can have a recurring campaign or whether it has to be a one-time thing. So as you see, for the first few, Fractured Atlas, Seed and Spark, Indiegogo, and Kickstarter, there's a one-time campaign type thing. So that means if you want to raise money again on their platform, you have to start over. Whereas with Patreon and with friends, it can be a recurring thing. And like I said, with Patreon, you can set a monthly amount that people pay so that they can continue to access your art. The other thing I wanted to mention, sorry, my thing is frozen for a moment, but the other thing I wanted to mention is that platforms really differ in many ways, as you can see, from the way that they process money, the way that they let you create or organize your fundraising campaign, and the different features that they offer. So again, I want to encourage you to do your own research to determine which ones are the ones that which platform will be the best one for you to list your campaign on, not only so that you can reach your goal, but also so that you can keep track and keep in contact with your supporters. And some of these platforms, I'll say one last thing, some of these platforms are easier to deal with versus others, in terms of if you don't feel like you're tech savvy and maybe you want more assistance, there are some of these platforms also offer customer support to help you get to the point where you can, put in the information you need so that you can launch your campaign successfully. So why launch a crowdfunding campaign? Well, that's a great question. So in terms of thinking about for creatives, when they need funding for a project, they often start off with grants or sponsors. And that can be a quite tedious and overwhelming process, because you have to fill out an application, you have to meet certain guidelines, you have to meet certain criteria, and that might be, a little overwhelming for someone who, their strong suit is really creating art and not necessarily filling out paperwork and things like that. So one benefit of crowdfunding, especially for creatives, is the fact that you can showcase your art as a means for getting people to want to and to support you. And so that means that it's pretty straightforward, right? You don't have to go through this long application process. Granted, you do have to go through some level of due diligence, right? Some application process to get onto these different platforms, because, they have objective measures and they won't just let anybody get on there. But at the same time, getting onto a crowdfunding platform is a lot less laborious and a lot easier and straightforward. And so that's one reason to start a crowdfunding campaign. The other thing that the crowdfunding campaign does is it gives you reach that you wouldn't necessarily have if not for the crowdfunding campaign being online, being on this platform that is accessible by people around the world, right? So one thing to really keep in mind is that the crowd in crowdfunding is really the people you want to engage, whether they are your investors, whether they are your supporters, whether they are your sponsors, whether they, might not even be able to support you financially, but they will tell people about your show, they will tell people about your art, they will share it on social media. All those people matter when it comes to your crowdfunding campaign. But just so I can double back. So a third reason to launch a crowdfunding campaign, especially as an artist, is because if you can showcase your art and have people support you, that gives your art or that gives your project validation. It shows that there's a market for that type of content, and that should, I think, help you determine, if this is the route you want to go, or how do you want to continue on this route. Or maybe you feel like, okay, this is not quite the attention that I thought I would get for this, so I may need to pivot. So it could go both ways, right? It could show that, yes, this is a great idea, this is a great project, maybe we should make a series out of it. Or it could be like, okay, this kind of fell flat, what can we do to make this a little more appealing to our supporters and our future supporters? Because you want to continually increase the amount of supporters you have, and the way to do that is to continuously create content. Even right now, I am creating content, right? And the point of this, I'm not doing this to necessarily sell this art, but I want to showcase my skills. I am showcasing my knowledge. I'm showcasing my capabilities, and you want to be able to do the same as well. So if you are in, the creative art, or if you're in music, or if you're in film, whatever it is, I think you have to really take into consideration that using video is a great way to get your message, to get your project in front of a lot of eyes. So if you go onto these different platforms that I mentioned, you'll notice that most of the campaigns have a video attached to their campaign, and that is a way to capture people, aside from going on social media, telling everybody about it, and having your supporters also share that information. So hopefully that was helpful. The last thing I'll say about why launch a crowdfunding campaign is because when it comes to traditional financing, another way that some new artists try to find financing is either through a sponsor, or even through traditional finance means like getting a loan or a credit card and things like that. And although, that has worked for some people, if you're not in a position to be able to do that right now, then I think this is an alternative to consider. And what crowdfunding does is it gives you options, right? It gives you more than one option than going the way that everyone else has gone. And like I said, when you really when you combine the funding with the crowdfunding, that is such a great way to get the word out there about your project, about your vision. So before the raise, I got this visual from Artist Marketing Resources, which is beautiful, I thought. But before the raise, you need to be able to really have a plan for what you're trying to sell. So yes, you're raising funds so that you can either film or maybe set up a team to create this project, but you also want to be able to put that down on paper. And I know that sometimes, that's not like the easiest thing to do, to be able to put your vision on paper, but it's something that has to be done, because you want to make sure that the people who support you, that back this project, are well informed, that they are so informed that there's no, I shouldn't say no doubt, but very little doubt in terms of how successful they feel you might be if they can help rally around you and support this project. So before the raise, start talking about what you're trying to do. You don't have to necessarily have a live campaign. And also, putting on my lawyer hat, you also shouldn't be promising anything, right? Because you don't want to get into any issues with different regulatory agencies. But if you have an idea, this is a great way to kind of, one, start talking about it, but two, to have your supporters keep you accountable. Oftentimes we have all these great ideas in our head and we don't share them, and then we don't write them down, and so they're gone. They leave, and then when they come back, they're not as great as they seemed when you first thought of it, etc. So before the raise, document, communicate, okay? So what you would need for a successful campaign, and honestly, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just, some bullet points to just keep in mind, so that you have something, to kind of, it's to build upon. So what you need for a successful campaign, I should say some of the things you need for a successful campaign. Story about the idea. People like stories. You are all in creative, you are all in the creative industry. So I know about, telling a story and being able to garner interest and appeal from people based on the story. Setting a funding goal. Remember earlier I was saying all of those platforms that I mentioned, and more, they require a fee to be able to fund or raise funds on their platform. So essentially, when you reach your goal, before you get one penny, they will take their fee off the top. So when you're setting your funding goal, keep that in mind. The other thing to keep in mind when setting your funding goal is what these different things will cost, and keeping in mind that you might need a little cushion, and that just because you budget it out doesn't mean it's going to be the exact number at the end of the day. If you have started a business, been in any kind of situation where you're kind of guessing along the way, then that sometimes the goals don't quite hit, or the budget is not quite what you thought it would be, and so you have to make room for a little extra. You want to be able to tell people how those funds will be used. And when I say promote your campaign, I put that in bold, and I say keep in touch with your backers, because even though you're online and even though it's accessible by people all around the world, it is on you, the business, the project owner, the creative, the person raising the funds. It is on you to make sure that you promote your campaign. The platforms have no obligation to promote your campaign. It is you that should be sending people to your platform, to the platform, so that they can reach your campaign. And when I mention keep in touch with your backers, I am talking about all those people who support you, all the people who are part of the crowd, whether they give you money or not. Those people should also be kept in the loop in terms of what your goals are, if they've changed, if you had to pivot, etc. Keep your backers informed. And then I add some stuff about, the CPA, a certified public accountant, and legal issues. So some legal issues that creatives encounter are, intellectual property issues, IP laws, copyright, trademark, things like that. You want to make sure that information, that stuff is intact, or that you're working towards that, and you let your funders know. And then I also mentioned jurisdictional regulations and laws, because some states allow you to raise money for certain types of projects. One state that I can think of right now is Georgia, because Georgia is a place that has a lot of, they have a lot of laws that are lenient to production companies and film companies that do a project there. It may be beneficial to raise funds from people who would be interested in your project in that state as well. After the raise, so we talked about before the raise. What do you do after the raise? I'll give you a moment to think about it. So after the raise, you do what you said you were going to do. This is not money that you can put into your pocket. After the raise, you have to go back to your funders, your supporters, your backers, and let them know this is the amount that we raised. This is what we're going to do with it. And let them know every quarter, this is what's going on. This is how things are moving along. And then when you launch your project, you tell them that too. And after all of that, after they've shown you that they support you, after they've shown you that they really want to make sure that your project, reaches the goals that you want it to reach, make the money that you need it to make, say thank you. Say thank you to those people. Those people have been behind you, supporting you along this journey. Thank them. Thank them in an email. Thank them with perks. However you want to thank them and show your appreciation, definitely do that, because it goes such a long way. Such a long way. And lastly, some of the benefits of crowdfunding. I think we touched on a few of them earlier, but just to reiterate, you can build community engagement around your project and positive networks. Because you're online, because you're putting your content out there, this is a way for others to see what you're doing and to potentially network and connect with you. And maybe that could be a way for your project to grow, or maybe a series or something like that. You gain market validation. People realize that, okay, this is the project that we really like, this visual art we really like, and we'll share that with others. And so that kind of shows you, like, this idea that you had, as you're making it come to life, there are people who really like it, and you should do more of it, right? The other thing is democratizing the access to capital, and then you have these amateur investors or amateur supporters. So oftentimes the people who are investing in these types of projects are new to this, right? And this is their way of, showing their support or throwing their support behind the project that they might not have known about had you not placed it on one of those platforms that we talked about. And when I think about democratizing access to capital, I'm thinking about I should say, the business or the project owner or the creative that is looking for funding or capital to fund your project, but because of how the world is and because of how traditional financing works, it's not that easy. So with crowdfunding, it allows you to have this option to not only engage your community, but then have a have the double effect of also getting them to support your work with their words and with their funds. And so some things to consider, putting my lawyer hat back on, regulatory compliance issues, depending on what state you are in, you might want to consider looking into whether you should be register as an LLC or a certain type of company if you have partners, income and taxes, these are also things to consider. And then consumer protection, especially if you are creating something that's tangible that you can pass out. You want to make sure that when you say that you're going to deliver something, that thing is delivered at that time. And if not, it's done in a reasonable amount of time. And you let your customers, your consumers, your followers, your backers know that I know we said it would be done in this amount of time, but it's not. So here, but here's an updated timeline. So that's all I have for you. I know I talked a little fast, so like I said, if you have questions, definitely ping me at Crowdie Advisors on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. I also have a YouTube page, and so if there are other topics you'd like me to cover, anything else that you'd want me to talk about, please let me know. I'd be happy to do so. Again, you can follow me or join me on the journey at these different on these different social media sites and ask any questions that you have. Thank you again for sticking with me for about half an hour to talk about crowdfunding for creatives. I just want to encourage you to really do your own research. Again, I have to encourage you to do that because there are many platforms out there and some are really popular, but that doesn't mean that that's the platform for what you're trying to do. So keep that in mind. And I hope you all have a great one. See ya.